Hello and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the daily Hindu news analysis. So let's begin today's discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen 9 important articles for a detailed analysis. We have few articles relevant for the mains exam and several small articles that are very important for the prelims examination. So let's cover all these topics in complete detail so that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. If you guys are benefiting from our initiatives, do let us know through your comments. Don't forget to press the like button and do subscribe to our channel. So before we start, a small reminder about Conquer Prelims Crash Course, which is taking place on the Unacademy app and as well as on our YouTube channel. The static phase of the crash course is continuing on the Unacademy app every day at 6 p.m. So today, Hima Bindu ma'am will be taking the next session for science and technology. And as part of the current affairs phase of the crash course on our YouTube channel, Mukesh sir will be taking up the next session on environment ecology live at 7:30 p.m. right here on our YouTube channel. So do attend these sessions live so that you can fully prepare for the upcoming prelims by revising both the static and the current affairs topics. You can easily access these sessions just by joining our Telegram channel. You can scan the QR code or search for Unacademy IAS English. And right before these sessions go live, we share the links through which you can access these classes. And also please note, the next batch for English online classroom program is all set to begin from May 30th. So would you wish to enroll for the program where India's top educators in the English medium will teach you for the 2025 exam? Please contact us at the number that has been provided over here. And also on May 26th, we are conducting the Unacademy All India Prelims Mock Test. This is a great opportunity for 2024 prelims aspirants to practice a full-length question paper, not just for general studies, but even for CSAT. So do register for the prelims mock test and the link has been provided in the video description. So with this, let's get started with the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper by looking at the first article from page number 6. This article is very important with regard to governance and especially for the topic of child welfare. The article deals with one of the most important laws with regard to child safety, child security and child welfare. That is the POCSO Act, Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act. So the column here is examining a new scheme that the Ministry of Women and Child Development has notified under the POCSO Act recently. In November 2023, the Ministry of Women and Child Development notified the start of a new scheme, the Scheme for Care and Support to Victims, which was established under the provisions of Section 4 and 6 of the POCSO Act. So here the writers are examining the features of the scheme, the beneficiaries, how does it benefit child welfare, how does it help protect children against sexual offences, and it also provides a critical evaluation. The writers are examining the shortcomings of the Scheme for Care and Support to Victims, which has been launched by the Government of India under the POCSO Act. So let's carry out a detailed analysis of this topic. So first note down, what is the scheme hoping to achieve? The Scheme for Care and Support to Victims, as the name itself tells you, is focused on providing integrated support to the victims of child sexual abuse, particularly for pregnant girls. If a minor girl child gets pregnant due to sexual abuse, due to rapes committed by the perpetrators, the girl child will go through severe trauma, will suffer physically, financially and socially as well. So to ensure that minor pregnant girl child who is a victim of sexual abuse receives all the care, protection and support, the government has launched this scheme under the provisions of the POCSO Act. It will provide medical assistance, financial assistance, and even it has provision for counseling and other support through child welfare committees and other state-run institutions that deal with child welfare and child safety. So first, let's examine what are the features of the POCSO Act. Why is POCSO Act one of the most important pieces of legislation that has been enacted by the Parliament? Then based on that, we will talk about the scheme that has been launched. We'll carry out a critical analysis looking at both the pros and cons of this new scheme. The POCSO Act was brought out by India it was enacted by the Indian Parliament in line with India's international obligation under the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. India signed and ratified the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child in 1992, which made it an obligation on India to bring out a national law that protects minor children from sexual offences. So based on this international obligation, India enacted the POCSO Act, which came into force in 2012. In 2012, the Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act came into effect, and the law has been recently amended in 2019 to make it a more stringent law. So one important provision about POCSO Act is that it defines the offences of sexual exploitation, sexual abuse of minor children. It defines a person below the age of 18 years as a minor child. It provides the definition of a minor child and categorizes any kind of sexual exploitation of minor children, any sexual abuse against minor children as punishable criminal offences. It goes on to provide very stringent punishment, and through the 2019 amendment, even death penalty has been provided as one of the punishment for grave offences. Through the latest amendment, death penalty provision was also added, and the law has been made even more stringent to ensure that the perpetrators of these crimes are delivered the strictest of punishment. Because minor children suffering from sexual exploitation or sexual abuse leaves behind a traumatic experience on them. It has a wider social impact as well. So to ensure that the law becomes a deterrent against such perpetrators of sexual violence against minor children, there are stringent punishments and provisions included under the law. And another standout feature of POCSO Act is that through the 2019 amendment, it has been made gender neutral. It's a gender neutral law. The minor child could be a boy or a girl. It does not discriminate between the victims on the lines of their gender. So be it a minor boy under the age of 18 or be it a minor girl under the age of 18, if they are sexually exploited or abused, right? So the provisions of POCSO Act will equally apply on the perpetrator. It's a gender neutral law. So now, since we know what POCSO Act deals with, let's evaluate the scheme for care and support to victims. Let's look at the provisions. Let's appreciate the government where it has to be appreciated, and let's also look at the assessment, the critical assessment, to identify the shortcomings in this particular scheme. See, first and foremost, the new scheme which has been launched is specifically meant for pregnant minor girls. The intention behind the scheme is to provide state institutional support to those pregnant girls who have become pregnant due to sexual abuse and sexual exploitation. And it specifically applies for those pregnant girls who have been abandoned by their families or who are orphaned. Essentially, if there is no one to take care of them, only in such circumstances the scheme will come into effect. So this raises a valid question. It weakens the gender neutrality of the law. Now you might argue, right, the case of pregnancy is of course biologically specific only to a girl child. But the writer's argument is the scheme could have been widened because even a minor boy who has been sexually exploited would undergo the same mental trauma and physical abuse which leads to a lasting impact. So if the government was interested in providing for support and care to the victims of child sexual abuse, it should have holistically covered both the genders. Not just pregnant girls, but even minor boys who have been victims of sexual abuse. So by leaving out minor boys, the writers are pointing out that the law essentially, which was gender neutral, is being weakened by the scheme which has been launched, which is specific only to pregnant girls, only those who are abandoned by their families. Because in many instances, right, when there is an instance where a minor girl has been raped and she turns out to be pregnant later, there are chances in conservative families that the girl child might be abandoned because there is a lot of stigma, taboo associated with these offenses. Or let's say, usually victims of such sexual abuse, right, if it's a minor girl, usually orphaned minor girls are targeted at orphanages and at such places where they are expected to be protected. There might be perpetrators who might have committed this offense, and there may not be anyone to take care of the pregnant girl child, right? So in such cases, the scheme hopes to provide care and protection and support through child welfare committees and state-led institutions to provide holistic care for pregnant minor girl childs. Definitely the scheme is laudable. It is definitely a noteworthy provision, but there is a shortcoming which the writers are correctly pointing out. If the government's intention was to provide holistic care and support to victims of child sexual abuse, it should have covered minor boys as well. It should have been more gender neutral, right? The provision of counseling, the provision of additional support could have been extended to minor boys as well, which has not been done in the case of this scheme. But of course, one could argue that the scheme is specifically meant for pregnant minor girl child. So, but the writers are saying that if the government is looking at child welfare, child safety and child security, then it should have adopted a more holistic approach to include the state support for care and support to victims, covering the minor boys as well who might face instances of child sexual abuse. Next, the scheme does not really differentiate between exploitative abuse and explorative sexual activity, which is quite normal amongst adolescents, amongst teenagers. See, let's say there is a minor girl or a minor boy under the age of 18 years. If he or she is sexually exploited, abused by an adult, let's say a minor girl has been raped by a known relative, or a minor boy has been abused by a known person who is in a position of authority, that constitutes child sexual abuse, which is a grave criminal offense punishable with the strictest of punishment under the law. But however, there could be many instances where a young boy and a girl under the age of 18 could be engaging in consensual explorative sexual activity. This is very normal adolescent behavior, and in countries like, let's say, India or even United States, there are many cases of teenage pregnancy, right? And not all these cases are a result of exploitative sexual abuse. There will be many cases where the pregnancy would have occurred due to consensual sexual activity, which is of exploratory nature, because at that age, at adolescent age or teenage years, right, teenagers would be more curious, would be more explorative about sexual activity. Now, this is where the responsibility of the government comes in. Under this scheme, priority should have been given for promoting SRH education. What do you mean by SRH? Sexual and reproductive health education. Essentially, sex education should have been integral to this scheme. The government should have identified the clear difference between exploitative sexual abuse, which might result in pregnancy, and consensual exploratory sexual activity, which might also result in pregnancy. Even in such cases, a minor girl child might be abandoned by the family. They may not receive adequate care and support. So it was essential to distinguish between the two cases, but the scheme fails to do that. The government's responsibility lies with promoting sex education to promote safe sex amongst minors, amongst teenagers, to make them aware about the consequences, about practicing safe sex, and ensuring that there is more acceptance of sex education in the education system. But this aspect is completely missing under the scheme, There is no preference or priority given to this. In fact, the scheme doesn't even distinguish between exploitative cases and explorative cases. This, according to the writers, is another critical flaw, because POCSO Act is specifically meant to deal with cases of child sexual abuse. So, yes, it's absolutely necessary to provide holistic care and support to pregnant girl child, right? Especially if the pregnancy is out of sexual exploitation. But how about explorative sexual activity, which is quite common amongst adolescents, amongst teenagers? The government should have extended the care and support and focused on SRH education, sex education essentially, to promote greater awareness by including the community, by including the parents, the teachers at the school level, at the grassroots level, to promote healthy sexual practices amongst adolescents and teenagers. This distinction is completely missing in the scheme. So this is one of the shortcomings identified by the writers. Is that clear? Next, the other big concern is about medical termination of pregnancy. Now, what if the minor girl child who is pregnant, right? Let's say it's because of child sexual abuse. Let's say the minor girl child has been raped and the girl child no longer wants to keep the pregnancy. She wants to terminate it. Of course, there is an entire procedure for that. There is a separate law that deals with medical termination of pregnancy. That is the MTP Act, the Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act. Now, according to the Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act, there are strict rules, procedures to be followed before a medical board can authorize a medical termination. Many cases reach the court as well, because in several cases of pregnancy, the threshold months would have been crossed. Every single day would be of critical importance, and usually the victims will approach the courts for an intervention to approve medical termination. But in case of minor pregnant girl child, this could lead to more complications. The strict adherence to rules and also the different set of rules provided under the scheme, under the care and support scheme under POCSO Act, is actually in contravention of the principles of the MTP Act. The writers are pointing out that there is a clear contradiction in the rules for medical termination of pregnancy under MTP Act and the rules under POCSO Act when it comes to extending care and support to minor pregnant girl child. There are unnecessary bureaucratic delays which have been added. For example, under the care and support to victims scheme, let's say a minor pregnant girl child wants to terminate her pregnancy. The new rule which has been introduced is that the district level officer along with the district health officer, they will decide whether they can approve the medical termination, whether it is safe or not. While checks and balances are necessary, but adding such bureaucratic delays would only lead to very significant delays in medical termination of pregnancy, and beyond certain number of weeks, termination might become medically unviable. It could become dangerous as well. It might force the minor girl child to go through with the pregnancy and to bear the child, that too out of sexual abuse. Right? So this leads to even more trauma on the expecting mother, and this is where the writers point out the complete contradiction that exists between the spirit of the MTP Act, which actually favors pregnant women, and the rules and regulations that have been added through the new scheme under the POCSO Act, which apparently contradicts the spirit of the MTP Act. So this is another major shortcoming. And even with regard to adoption, there is a contradiction. Now let's say the minor girl child who is pregnant goes through with the pregnancy, bears the kid as well, but of course she is in no position to raise the child. So in such cases, the child could be handed over to the child welfare committees and can even be put up for adoption. So if you look at adoption rules in India, right, adoption is regulated by CARA, the Central Adoption Resource Authority, or CARA. So there is an entire set of laws and set of rules that regulate adoption in the country. But under this new scheme, under the POCSO Act, Again, there is a contradiction being seen with the existing adoption rules and regulations. So, minor girl child who has gotten pregnant due to sexual abuse will find it more challenging, more difficult to go for adoption, to give up the kid, primarily because she won't be able to raise the child on her own. She herself is still a minor child. She won't be able to bring up a child on her own. So adoption should have been the norm. Adoption should have been more simplified, but instead the new rules create more complications, and it actually is in contradiction to the existing adoption guidelines and regulations, which is regulated by CARA. So the contrary rules that exist with regard to medical termination, adoption, it ends up placing more burden on the pregnant girl child, right, who is a minor, a victim of sexual abuse, and increases the traumatic experience for them. So these are some very valid concerns and shortcomings that the writers are pointing out, correctly pointing out. Then finally, the writers are of the view that the Ministry of Women and Child Development has not fully taken into account the financial implications of the new scheme. Because under the new scheme to provide care and support to victims of child sexual abuse, the scheme promises financial payment of 6,000 rupees initially and later 4,000 rupees throughout the period of pregnancy and even later for helping in raising the child. So until the minor girl child attains the age of 21 years and becomes eligible for the benefits of Mission Vatsalya, which is a very important government mission, which is in line with sustainable development goals. Under Mission Vatsalya, which is also implemented by Ministry of Women and Child Development, the focus is on child safety and security, right? So those who are in contravention of law, minor children who are in contravention of law, or minor children who need state protection, right? So they are provided support and safety and security through child welfare committees under Mission Vatsalya. So until the pregnant girl child attains 21 years of age and becomes eligible for the benefits of Mission Vatsalya, she would be eligible for financial benefits up to 6,000 rupees initially and later a monthly payment of 4,000 rupees. So if you compute the financial burden on the government, right, per minor pregnant girl child, and take into account the average number of such cases occurring in the country, it amounts to a significant financial burden. And the problem here is the government doesn't seem to have computed the entire financial implication, because there is no separate allocation which has been made. There is no explicit budgetary allocation provided under the new scheme. So promise has been made, but writers are not sure whether the government will be able to deliver on the financial promise that has been made. So this is another shortcoming which the writers are flagging. So based on this assessment, the writer's argument is that there is a need to relook at the rules and regulations governing the scheme for care and support to victims of child sexual abuse. They praise the scheme, they appreciate the intention of the government. But however, there are few drawbacks, there are few shortcomings which need to be addressed with better rules and regulations. So there is a need to take a relook, review the scheme which has been notified, and maybe update the rules and regulations to make it more comprehensive, more holistic, and more child-friendly. So this is what we learned from this important article. You can expect a mains question based on this under GS paper 2. Now let's move on to the next article from page number 7, which is related to international relations and as well as economy. The article is focusing on GSP, Generalized System of Preferences. This is the focus of the article in the context of India-US trade relations. The writer is focused on India-US trade relations and a trade concept called GSP, Generalized System of Preferences. So let's understand this topic as well in complete detail, because it is an important topic. Every now and then India brings up this issue with the United States, and recently in 2019, then US President Donald Trump had suspended the GSP status for India. India, which enjoyed the GSP status with the US. This trade status was taken away by Donald Trump and it lapsed in 2020. This trade mechanism was largely beneficial for the Indian export-focused industries, and they have taken a hit as far as market access into the US economy is concerned. So let's understand what exactly is GSP, how does it fit into the global trade mechanisms that are there under the WTO, right? What is the primary intention behind GSP, and why did the US cancel GSP for India? And right now, what is the concern for India, and how does GSP benefit developing nations like India? So these are some important concepts that you need to learn. There can be prelims and even mains questions based on this topic. So let's start with the basics. See, the global trade mechanism is governed by the WTO, correct? Under the World Trade Organization, there is a global trading mechanism which has been created with the intention of creating a fair trading equation for all the countries. The primary purpose of WTO is to ensure that countries don't resort to unfair trading practices, to create a level playing field for developed countries, developing nations, underdeveloped countries, so that there is a level playing field and equal opportunity available for all the trading partners. So under WTO, there are some exceptions. For example, free trade agreements, bilateral FTAs or multilateral FTAs, they are an exception, right? WTO allows for such trade agreements to be worked out between two countries or between a group of countries. So through a trade agreement, countries will give preferential treatment to each other. They will reduce the tariffs, the duties, giving better market access to each other with the intention of increasing the bilateral trade volume, right? That's what you would have learnt about trade agreements or free trade agreements. But under WTO rules, you would have also come across a concept called MFN status, most favored nation status. As per the WTO rules, it's mandatory for countries to accord MFN status to their trading partners, to all the trading partners. What do you mean by MFN status? MFN status essentially means that you will not discriminate against a particular country. Essentially, you will treat a certain country as your most favored nation. Let's say, for example, hypothetically, India treats US as a most favored nation, and we have given MFN status to the US. Then we would be obligated to give the same treatment, the same status to every other trading partner as well, as a guarantee that we will not discriminate against any country. We will give you the same treatment in our trade relationship as the treatment we have given to our most favored nation, which is the US. Let's say with US, hypothetically, we have certain trade concessions. We have reduced tariffs, we have more easy access to the markets, right? We have struck a deal and we have a most favored nation treatment given to the US. We are promising to other countries as well through the WTO MFN status that we will treat you as if we are treating the US. We will give you the same treatment. We will not create any discrimination. That is the whole idea behind MFN status, right? It's not that we will treat that country as the most favored nation. It's just that we will not discriminate against that country. We will give you the same treatment as we are giving to our most favored nation. So that's the whole concept of MFN status, right? So India is always obliging with WTO rules. We have accorded MFN status accordingly, right? But however, there is an exception that exists here as well. This exception is the GSP. Just like how FTAs are an exception from WTO rules, GSP is also an exception, right? This system has been designed to allow developed countries to assist developing nations and underdeveloped countries to strengthen their economies. It's a system through which developed economies like US can provide preferential treatment to certain developing nations, underdeveloped countries, so that they can give opportunities for the traders and exporters and producers in these countries, which will help strengthen the economies of developing nations. So this is an exceptional measure provided under WTO as an exception. So under GSP, any developed country can provide preferential treatment to any developing nation or underdeveloped country. Is that clear? When we say preferential treatment, it essentially refers to reduced tariffs in selected sectors, especially in labor-intensive sectors where more jobs can be created. Developed countries can use GSP as an incentive. They can provide preferential access to developing and underdeveloped countries by according them the GSP status. Is that clear? So when GSP status is given, let's say by US to India, there are certain specific sectors which will be identified by the US. The US is obligated to bring out a law through its Congress as well. That is the domestic legal obligation of the US government. And this law passed by the US Congress will specify for how many years the GSP status will be provided, to which country, to which specific sectors. So specific sectors in the Indian economy will be identified, which are labor intensive, which can help in creating more jobs, which can boost Indian exports to the US. And they will enjoy a preferential line of treatment, meaning they'll get reduced tariffs. Sometimes tariffs are near zero or almost zero, giving sometimes duty-free access as well. So this will immensely benefit the export-oriented industries, especially the smaller industries. The MSME sector will happen to be a huge beneficiary of the GSP status, which is a privileged status given by developed nations to developing countries and underdeveloped economies. So India was one amongst the developing nation which enjoyed the GSP status with the US. All right. Similarly, US can give GSP status to many other developing nations. And also India can receive GSP status from many other developed countries as well. It's not just limited to the India-US relationship. Please understand this. Let's say developed nations like Japan, European countries, they can accord GSP status to developing nations as well. So India as a developing country can receive GSP status from many developed countries. Similarly, developed countries can give GSP status to many other developing nations. Understood? So with reduced tariffs, there will be better access to the market of the developed economies. The intention here is to improve market access. Give better access to developing economies so they can access the developed markets more easily. They can sell their produce in the developed economies and find a bigger market, which will increase the exports of that developing nation, which will increase economic activity, create more jobs, and thus help in the building of the economy of these developing and underdeveloped countries. That is the whole intention behind the GSP system or generalized system of preferences. So until 2019, India enjoyed the GSP status from the US. I hope you know US is one of the biggest export markets for India. It's one of our largest trading partners. If you exclude European Union, US happens to be one of the top 2 trading partners for India, along with China. Our bilateral trading volume is close to $200 billion every year. The India-US trade volume, which includes both exports of India and exports of US, right? Cumulatively, our trade volume is close to $200 billion per year, which is a massive trade relationship, one of the biggest trade relationships that we have. And the best part is that India enjoys a trade surplus with the US. India enjoys a trade surplus. We don't have a deficit. What does it mean? It means that India exports more to the US market than what we import from the US into the Indian market. This is usually not the case. If you look at India-China trade relations, for example, we have a massive trade deficit, meaning we have an import dependency on China. We are exporting very less to China and importing a lot from China, which creates an import dependency for us. But that is not the case with US. With US, India enjoys a trade surplus of nearly $25 to $30 billion every year, which clearly means we are exporting more goods and services to the US as compared to what we are importing. So this is great opportunity for India because this helps in creating more jobs in the Indian market by accessing the American market. The American market was more accessible to Indian producers, Indian developers because of the GSP system. GSP provided these benefits to various MSME industries. All right. So India enjoyed these benefits. A lot of sectors in India benefited from this, and that is one reason why we could have greater access to the American market and export more goods, more commodities and services to the US market. Is that clear? But however, in 2019, US President Donald Trump, the then president, I'm sure many of you would be familiar with Trump's economic and trade policies. Donald Trump comes from the far right wing with regard to his political ideology, which is often known to adopt very conservative economic policies, inward-looking conservative economic policies. Trump's priority was to protect the American domestic economy, and Trump took a stand against trade agreements, against preferential treatment. Trump would end US involvement in various trade agreements that were being negotiated. For example, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which was supposed to be led by the US, right? Trump withdrew US from the negotiations related to the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Trump was even talking about withdrawing from the WTO, as he believed that US was getting very little in return and it was only contributing to other countries. This was the political stand of Donald Trump, which largely comes from his political ideology. So Trump would even launch a trade war against most of the trading partners. Trump initiated a tariff war with China to restrict China's access to the American market. Trump wouldn't even spare his European allies. UK, Germany, France, these major European economies were also targeted under the Trump administration, and a trade war was launched by the US against European economies as well. So Trump even accused India on similar lines of benefiting from the GSP. Trump blamed India for unilaterally benefiting from the GSP without comprehending the actual intention behind the GSP system. See, GSP actually helps the developed countries or the donor countries as well. How? They can use the GSP status, which they can accord, to place obligations on the developing nation, which is a recipient country. For example, US can mandate a country like India to maintain higher labor standards, to maintain better environmental standards, to provide for better intellectual property protection, right? So US can place a mandate. It can say that if India wants GSP status to be maintained, then India should fulfill these criteria regarding labor standards, environmental standards, IP rights, enforcement of IP laws, etc., which will benefit the US companies. For example, it can seek abolition of child labor in exploitative industries, force the developing nations to come out with strict laws to ban child labor and enforce the ban on child labor, and push developing nations for implementing better environmental standards, push for strict implementation of IP protection. These are the advantages for the donor country, the developed country. So GSP is not truly one-sided as Trump wants you to believe, right? But Trump anyways was known for his erratic decision making, and he went ahead and accused India of unilaterally benefiting from the GSP, right? And in 2019, GSP status for India was withdrawn, and in 2020, the GSP with India lapsed. There was a need for an extension. It has to be frequently reviewed and extended by the US Congress. The US Congress has to pass the law so that GSP system can continue. But this was lapsed in 2020. So since the last 5 years, India hasn't enjoyed the GSP status with US, which means it has affected our exporters, our producers, our MSME industry, which was benefiting from it. For example, the medical device industry, even pharmaceutical industry, right? Handicrafts industry. All these industries benefited hugely from the GSP status given by the US. Even the automobile, motorcycle industry in India, right? They were the big beneficiaries. But all these sectors have taken a hit when it comes to accessing the US market because the preferential treatment is no longer available. The reduced tariffs are no longer available. At one point, this was the very foundation of our trade relationship, but it was damaged by the policies of Donald Trump. So now the writer is urging India-US to work upon this and to bring back GSP system so that it can benefit few sectors in India give India preferential market access to the American market, and it will allow US to enforce better standards on India as well, better labor, environment and IP standards on India. The writer strongly feels that GSP is at the very heart of India-US trade relations, which can benefit both the parties equally. Understood? So that is the core of the argument. So India on its part has been bringing up the issue multiple times. Every time PM Modi has interacted with be it Trump or later with President Biden, he has brought up the issue. India's Foreign Ministry, Commerce Ministry as well, in regular interactions with their US counterparts, they have regularly brought up the GSP issue, and we have urged US to restore the GSP status for India. Understood? So that is the important point that you need to understand from this article. Now let's look at the third article from page number 9, which is also very important for your mains exam. It is very relevant for science and technology and also for internal security, because this article is dealing with social media. Some of the problems associated with the misuse of social media, right? It's an important topic under internal security and also under science and technology. Now, as you all know, social media platforms are quite addictive. Be it YouTube, be it Twitter or X, Instagram, Facebook, right? Any social media platform, they are inherently very addictive because it essentially gives you a dopamine hit. It gives you that instant gratification, instant satisfaction, which triggers a very toxic trait in us. It alters our psychological behavior, gets us hooked to these apps, and you end up spending hours together on these apps. I'm sure most of us are victims of extensive social media usage in some way or the other, right? The reason why it happens is because the algorithms of these social media apps are designed in a particular way to keep you hooked onto the platform. You look at any social media platform, be it Meta, which is Facebook essentially, or other platforms like Instagram, right? YouTube, Twitter, Telegram, any social media platform. They are basically designed to keep the user hooked onto the platform, to increase their engagement on their platform. Now, what do we prefer to watch on social media platforms? Or what do we prefer to read? Generally, it is something we like, correct? Our likes, our preferences would vary from person to person. It's very subjective. But this is what the algorithms are designed for. These algorithms are designed to pick up your traits, your personality traits, your individual preferences, and customize the feed which they are showing you on the app, right? So that they push only such content, such videos, images, posts, and visuals which appeals to that particular user. Now, for example, I'm sure many of you would have experienced this. The moment you started focusing on civil services preparation, the moment you searched for UPSC syllabus or best IAS coaching institute on Google, you would have been flooded with a lot of ads and also very similar content related to UPSC. The moment you watch this Hindu analysis session, you'll be flooded with content from many other channels as well. The same kind of content will keep appearing on your screen. This is not coincidence. This is by design. The algorithm is designed to pick up your preferences, look at your watch time, look at what you're liking, where you're commenting, with whom you're sharing the videos. It shows that if there is greater engagement from your side, you prefer such content, you like such content, right? So the algorithm will flood you with similar content from multiple sources, and essentially you are trapped in a hole. You're trapped in a virtual environment where your whole world becomes about that particular issue or that particular topic or that particular content that you're searching for. This is called the rabbit hole effect. These algorithms are designed to push you inside a rabbit hole. That is what this image is depicting over here. Rabbits which dug a burrow into the ground, right? They live in a very confined space, a very small space, which is their world. So such an artificial world gets created for you. A virtual world is created for you by these algorithms. Let's say tomorrow you show a lot of interest in IPL, right? You watch few reels, you like some of them. Tomorrow you're flooded with all IPL related content on all these platforms, and you get locked in that world. You might be pushed to watch more matches instead of studying, instead of attending classes, which alters your behavior, which alters your decision making. Because your virtual world has been manipulated. You have been trapped in a rabbit hole. You're not looking outside of it. You've been trapped in the IPL world. You're not able to come out of it. You're not able to look outside. And you're not able to concentrate on your goal, which is cracking this examination. Right? So that's what happens with social media. It's highly addictive. And each like, each comment gives you a dopamine hit. It keeps bringing you back. And that is the reason why you keep scrolling for hours together. Right? So this is based on basic psychology. The algorithms are smart enough to exploit human psychology. Now, this is a matter of serious concern, social concern, security concern, when it's happening with adults. What if the same happens with children? Right? The consequences are more severe. Correct? So that is the issue being explored by the article here. If you look at minor children, today, children as young as 8, 9, 10 years old, they are having access to smartphones. They know how to use social media platforms. Right? Most children have social media accounts, right, from age 8, 9, 10 to all the way till age 18. Now, we don't know what kind of content they are being exposed to. Out of curiosity, they might search for something, right? And what if they get pushed down into a wrong rabbit hole by the algorithm? What if they are exposed to all the wrong content? What if they're exposed to sexually explicit content, nudity, or verbally explicit content, or violent content, or content which pushes them towards other addictions, from smoking to drinking to drug addiction? And also, once young children, minors, are pushed into a rabbit hole by the algorithm, there are very high chances of their data privacy, data security being compromised. Right? Plus, there are several perverts on online platforms who prey on children, right? From, let's say, child pornography to other forms of online sexual abuse. They look out for minor children, and there is a great risk of children being exposed to such elements as well. Or there is a possibility of children becoming victims of various kinds of cybercrime. So if you're interested about protecting the data privacy, data security of your child, and if you're interested in ensuring the well-being of your child, mental, physical, and psychological well-being of your child, it's very important to ensure that they don't fall into the rabbit hole effect created by social media algorithms. Right? So this is a policy concern for governments as well, particularly for European Union. That is what the article is talking about. In the European market, the EU has begun an investigation against Meta and Instagram for the effects that their algorithms are having on minor children. Is that clear? When it comes to regulating social media, the EU has been a role model for the rest of the world. When every other country has been falling behind when it comes to the advances in social media technology, EU has stayed one step ahead. It has cracked down on most social media applications and even levied very heavy fines on them when they don't follow the rules and the regulations. Be it the anti-competition, antitrust laws, which are very strict in the European market. When these antitrust, anti-competition laws were violated by Google or Apple or Meta or others, these companies were strictly penalized by the European Union, and hundreds of $millions worth of fines were levied on them. Correct? So today, European Union has a very stringent law which is in place to ensure data safety, data privacy, and data security of its citizens, which is called the DSA, the Digital Services Act of the European Union. This law is seen as a model law for any country which seeks to regulate social media and place regulations on how they are leveraging the market. So under the Digital Services Act, these companies, the social media firms, they have very stringent obligations on them, especially when it comes to protecting children from any kind of abuse that they might face online, protecting the safety, the security of children on these online platforms, protecting their data privacy, and also ensuring that children are not pushed into addictive behavior by the algorithm, to ensure that children do not fall into the rabbit hole effect created by the algorithm, and ensure that it does not lead to toxic addictive behavior which might manipulate the choices, the decisions that the child would be making. So regarding this, there are very strict provisions in the EU jurisdiction brought out through the Digital Services Act, which was recently enacted. It has recently come into force. So under the provisions of this law, the EU has begun an investigation against Meta and Instagram to check their algorithms, whether they are pushing children into the rabbit hole effect, whether they are deliberately encouraging addictive behavior amongst children just because they can get more watch time, just because they can get more engagement on their apps and platforms. If they are held guilty, they stand to be penalized by the EU up to 6% of their revenue from the European market, which is going to be a massive amount. So this is what we learn from this article. The EU is leading the way when it comes to regulating social media firms, especially the large social media firms which have a global presence, which have millions of subscribers. So there are lessons for India as well. India also recently has brought out a Digital Protection Act to guarantee your data safety, data privacy. But there is a lot India should do as well when it comes to protecting children, minor children, from the abusive, toxic nature of social media algorithms. Right? For example, introducing parental controls. Parents can set certain controls, regulations on the app that the children are using so that they are protected from any kind of abusive, exploitative content. Right? Parents should have a higher degree of control on what minor children are watching. Plus, there should be inbuilt tools, inbuilt technological features which will protect children from such dangerous content. For example, Meta has said it has built an AI tool which can recognize sexually explicit content, violent content, and abusive content, and it can filter it out, block it out, so that children are not exposed to it. Even if it is sent as private DMs or messages, right? Children accounts or child accounts can be protected because of this AI tool that Meta has built. So what kind of other technological innovations are the companies using to protect children? Are the algorithms encouraging such addictive behavior, or are they focused on child well-being? These are the aspects that EU is going to investigate. And if it holds these companies accountable, right, if it finds that these companies are deliberately encouraging such addictive behavior by pushing children into a rabbit hole through their algorithms, through customization of the app, then these companies are going to be penalized, and that could set a precedent for the rest of the world to follow, including for India. So that is what we learned from this important column. Now let's head towards the prelims section, where we have few small articles which are very, very important for the upcoming prelims and as well as for 2025 prelims. On page number 5, we have an article related to environment and ecology. The article is talking about an elephant census which is going to be held in southern India. Just like we have All India Tiger Estimation, right, that brings out the tiger census data once in every 4 years. There is a All India Elephant Census as well, but this article is referring to a separate elephant census which is conducted by the southern states in India, especially by Tamil Nadu, Karnataka and Kerala. Because these three states, they share a common habitat for the Indian elephant. Right? They also have one of the largest concentration of elephants. The elephant density in these three states is one of the highest in the country, especially at the tri-junction of these states in the Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve, from Wayanad Sanctuary in Kerala to Mudumalai National Park in Tamil Nadu to Bandipur Nagarhole in Karnataka. It's one of the most critical habitats for elephants. Right? So all across the Western Ghats and other protected areas in these three states, there is a healthy elephant population. And the thing is, elephants are migratory in nature. They move over large distances. There are important migratory corridors that they make use of while moving from one area to another. So a herd of elephants found in Wayanad, they might migrate to Bandipur in Karnataka over a few months. Right? So keeping this in mind, it's important to know the number of elephants, the migration patterns, because it's very essential not just in the conservation of elephants and protection of elephants, but it is very important to deal with man-animal conflict situations. Of late, there have been increasing incidents of man-animal conflict in Tamil Nadu and also in Kerala, where wild elephants have been spotted entering human habitations, leading to economic loss and property loss and even loss of life. So many such incidents can be prevented or better managed if we have better data on the number of elephants, the distribution of elephants across these states. So this has become a regular exercise right now. Even last year, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu and Kerala conducted such an elephant census. In 2017 as well, they had conducted a similar census. So according to the previous census, around 1,900 to 2,300 elephants were counted approximately in these three states. Prior to that, more than 3,300 to 5,000 elephants were estimated in 2017. So now to get a better picture of the elephant distribution and the overall population in these states, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu and Kerala along with Andhra Pradesh are collectively conducting an elephant census in southern India. So in such a census, different methods are used, different sampling methods are used to get an exact count. Of course, you can't physically count each and every animal individually. That might be almost impossible in such a large forest area. So usually sampling and estimating methods are used and different techniques are used to get as close an estimate as possible. So one technique is the block count method or the sampling method, where a forest area is divided into different blocks and a team of forest officials from the State Forest Department along with volunteers from NGOs and civil society, right, and even members from local community, they will move around the block which is assigned to them, spot the elephants directly, visually, and record the elephant data. This is one part of the exercise. But of course, every inch of the forest land can't be covered. It is almost impossible. So few blocks are identified, and in those blocks, elephant sightings are done by these ground level teams which record the data, log the data. The other kind of estimation is by using the excreta of the animal, the dung count. By estimating the dung samples collected in a given area, you can bring out an estimate of the number of elephants. You can estimate the elephant density by looking at the dung count present in a given block. So this is again a statistical exercise. It's an indirect method. If this is the quantum of dung count found in a block, this could be the number of elephants that could be present. That's why there is a range given. It's not specific number of elephants. The estimates say that there might be 50 to 80 elephants in this given habitat. So that's an indirect estimation. And finally, the third method is by estimating the watering holes present in the forest habitat. The presence of water holes where animals come to drink water gives a very good estimate, an indirect estimate regarding the elephant concentration in a given area. So all these indirect methods and direct methods are used. Of course, when it comes to, let's say, tigers, even camera traps are used, radio collars are used to get a more specific count. But with elephant census, these are the methods that are used because many elephants are migratory. And sometimes you can get the numbers wrong. The estimate could be off by a very big margin because elephants might have migrated in large numbers from one state to another. Or you might end up double counting the same herd of elephants. So keeping all the concerns in mind, the states are trying to come out with the best methodology possible to get the most accurate estimate. Is that clear? Next, on page number 10, we have a small article referring to the AK-203 assault rifle. I'm sure you would have heard about AK-47, AK-57, the most popular assault rifles in the world, which are of Soviet origin. The next generation of AK assault rifle is the AK-203. So it's one of the most advanced assault rifles which is of Russian origin. And few years ago, India signed a deal with Russia to procure the AK-203 assault rifles. Not just procure them, but to manufacture them indigenously in India. So according to this deal between India and Russia, a joint venture has been established in Uttar Pradesh. In UP, very close to Amethi, right? A massive defense factory has been set up. It's a joint venture between the Ordnance Factory Board and other defense production institutions in India with the Russian company. So there is transfer of technology involved in the deal. several lakh assault rifles will be produced under this joint venture indigenously in India, and the idea is to provide advanced assault rifles to our armed forces and paramilitary forces. See, currently, the primary issue weapon for the armed forces has been the INSAS. But INSAS rifle, produced and designed indigenously, has had a lot of issues, especially while being used in difficult terrain and difficult environment. And especially frontline troops involved in counter-terrorist, counter-insurgency operations have found many difficulties with the INSAS and many problems with the indigenous INSAS rifle. Apart from that, Indian forces are known to use AK-47, which is of older design, and we have also procured the Israeli Tavor assault rifles only for special forces, like the Marcos or the Para-SF, right? So some special forces, including NSG, they have procured the Israeli Tavor assault rifles. But to ensure that the armed forces across, from army to the other paramilitary border guarding forces, are equipped with the latest assault rifle, India has secured this deal with Russia, where there is transfer of technology. And in initial lot, there will be localization which will be promoted. In line with Make in India initiative, India has mandated that over a period of time, the local content in the assault rifles produced in India will keep increasing. Initially, in the initial batch of few thousand AK-203, the indigenous content was very less, just around 5%. So this is being gradually increased to up to 70%, and in a year or two, the indigenous local content will touch 100%. So very soon, 100% of the gun will be produced in India, in this factory, in this joint venture set up in Uttar Pradesh. So several lakh AK-203 assault rifles are being produced, and it's already being inducted into the Indian Army and the other forces. So that is one key topic for you. It shows how Russia is a key supplier of military hardware to India. Next, other than this, there's another assault rifle, a modern assault rifle, which is in the news. The SIG 716 assault rifles. It's designed and developed by a company called SIG SOAR from the United States. This is also one of the most advanced assault rifles in the world, which India has procured for frontline troops. So apart from the Russian AK-203 and Israeli Tavor, we have also procured the SIG 716 from SIG SOAR of the United States. This is a direct deal with the US. The company produces that in the US, and we have directly procured it for frontline troops, especially those involved in counter-terrorist, counter-insurgency operations. So just know the names of these assault rifles and the country of origin. There can be a prelims question based on this. Next, we have an update regarding the clashes that we studied about yesterday in Kyrgyzstan, where allegedly local Kyrgyz mobs had targeted medical students, foreign medical students. Yesterday we understood that medical students from several countries, from Egypt, from Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, etc., they have been targeted and attacked by local mobs due to differences between the locals and the foreigners. A lot of videos circulated on social media as well, right? A lot of pressure came on India's foreign ministry from students and families that what is the government doing to protect them. But now there is a clarification from the government of India. It's an update from the government of India and the Indian mission in Bishkek that there have been no attacks on Indian students. So that is what the government is saying. Although it is disputed by several Indian medical students who have taken to social media to share the videos to show how their hostels, their colleges have been attacked by the Kyrgyz mobs. But the Indian mission has said there are no reports of attacks on Indian students in particular. Meaning there might have been attacks on Pakistani students or Egyptian students, but there have been no targeted attacks against Indian medical students. That's what the Indian Ministry of External Affairs has informed. So that's an update for you. Next, on the same lines, there's an article about Indian students who are studying abroad. You should just know the number of Indian students who are studying abroad in foreign countries, because the statistic could be important when you're writing a mains answer. Because in international relations, Indian diaspora is an important topic. The safety, welfare and well-being of Indian community abroad is of direct interest to the government of India, right? So you should know how many Indians are studying abroad. And according to Ministry of External Affairs, the number is 13.24 lakhs as of 2022. In most countries, the Indian student community happens to be the largest foreign student community. if you look at this article in Israel, right, the largest foreign student community is the Indian student community. Almost close to 1,800, 2,000 students who are studying in Israeli universities are from India, which makes them the largest foreign student community in Israel. So this is the case in most countries. Either it's India or China, which are contributing the most number of foreign students to other countries. And you should know that more than 1 million Indian students are going out every year to study in foreign universities. And that is a massive number, right? So just being aware of the statistic that 13.24 lakh students went abroad in 2022 is going to be very important when you're writing a mains answer on the Indian diaspora and Indian students who are studying abroad. Next, on the same page, we have a reference to an initiative of the WHO, the World Health Organization. The WHO maintains a priority list of pathogens, especially deadly bacteria, which is of concern when it comes to the spread of contagious bacterial infections and diseases. This list is called the Bacterial Pathogens Priority List. Please write this down. UPSC might ask you. The Bacterial Pathogens Priority List is being maintained by which institution? It's maintained by the World Health Organization. It was brought out in 2017. It was brought out in 2017, under which the WHO updates the list regularly to list all the dangerous bacteria which have the potential to lead to a bigger breakout. For example, it consists of various antibiotic resistant bacteria, right, which are resistant to the first line of medicines and drugs available. The list consists of even the bacteria that causes tuberculosis, Mycobacterium tuberculosis, which is a major concern in developing nations in Asia and Africa. The list also consists of Salmonella, Shigella, and other types of bacteria associated with poor countries and developing countries where hygiene standards are very low. Right? Usually it's food and water which gets contaminated with such types of bacteria, such strains of bacteria, which can lead to the spread of various diseases. So all such pathogens which are of concern, especially bacteria, they are maintained on this priority list by the WHO, and it is frequently updated. Got it? So the latest list has been brought out. You need not know all the bacteria that are listed here. UPSC will not expect that from you. But at least knowing that who brings out the list, who maintains the list, would be relevant. Next, on the same page, we have an article related to organized crime, transnational crime, and the threat it poses to the security of countries around the world. So the topic of transnational crime and organized crime is in the news. It has been reported over here because of a summit which was held recently in Vienna, that is in Austria. The 33rd Commission on Crime, Prevention and Criminal Justice took place in Vienna in Austria. Now this is one of the important commissions that deals with organized crime and transnational crime. It is a UN commission. Please write this down. It was established in 1992 by the ECOSOC, by the Economic and Social Council of the United Nations. The ECOSOC is one of the primary organs of the UN. So ECOSOC adopted a resolution in 1992, which was later approved by UN General Assembly as well, that led to the establishment of this UN Commission on Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice. So regularly the meetings are held, the summits are held, which brings all the countries together, and also the concerned organizations that deal with organized crime, transnational crime and terrorist financing. All those intergovernmental organizations, international organizations are also brought together under this commission. For example, the FATF, Financial Action Task Force, which is responsible for tackling money laundering and terrorist financing, participates in this meeting. Then Interpol, which is responsible for promoting coordination between police and law enforcement agencies to tackle crime. And as well as the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, that is responsible for tackling drug trafficking and other forms of organized crime and transnational crime, which is not just a criminal threat and a security threat, it is closely aligned and linked with terrorism, terrorist financing and insurgency as well. Because several terrorist and insurgent groups, they have connections with drug trafficking cartels, arms trafficking cartels. They have links with human trafficking cartels as well, which are all transnational crimes. Today, even cyber crimes have emerged to be of transnational nature, and they share close connections with terrorist financing. So this remains a global concern. So all these issues were discussed at the 33rd Commission on Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice, and basically they're trying to achieve some of the goals laid down under the Sustainable Development Agenda. Under Agenda 2030, there are few goals related to tackling organized crime as well, which is a transnational threat, a global threat. So this is one important development. You should note that this commission is coming out with a UN Crime Congress, which is going to be held in 2026. 2 years from now, a UN Crime Congress will be held where all UN members will come together to discuss measures to combat organized crime, transnational crime. So just be familiar with all these global efforts dealing with organized crime. There could be a prelims question based on this. Coming to the last topic for today, on the supplement page of the Science and Tech section in the Hindu, we have this image, this spectacular image of an active volcano in Indonesia. Of late, multiple volcanoes have erupted in Indonesia, one after the other. And here in this image, where you can see a active eruption along with the lightning which has been induced here, this was reported at Mount Ibu. You should know where Mount Ibu is located, why Indonesia is so vulnerable for multiple volcanic events. Mount Ibu is located in the Halmahera island of Indonesia. So please make a note of this. It's a stratovolcano which is known for its explosive potential. If there is an eruption, right, it tends to be very explosive in nature, resulting in the flow of hot lava and magma. So Indonesia in the last few months has witnessed multiple eruptions from Mount Merapi to Mount Ibu, right? Multiple eruptions have occurred in the last few months, and Indonesia has always been this vulnerable to volcanoes, earthquakes, because it sits on the Pacific Ring of Fire. The Pacific Ring of Fire is a very active tectonic zone, right, present around the Pacific Ocean. There are multiple boundary plates which are interacting that contributes to the high seismicity, high volcanic activity in the region, and Indonesia sits right on top of the Pacific Ring of Fire. So Indonesia has around 127 active volcanoes, and several of them have erupted in the recent months, causing widespread devastation. Volcanoes can destroy the nearby villages because of the hot lava magma flow. It can trigger severe rainfall as well because of the aerosols that are introduced into the atmosphere that can cause flash floods. And also the mud which gets accumulated, the other soil and earth material that gets accumulated following the explosive event. It could result in a cold landslide, right, or cold floods where all the mud and earthy material will slide down and it will crash into the nearby villages, leading to major disasters. So flash floods, landslides become an associated disaster, secondary disaster. Plus the toxic gases, right, which are emitted. It contributes to global warming, that is climate change. It could be very toxic to the population nearby. It can disrupt air travel, right? The entire region where the aerosols are spreading could become unviable for air traffic, and air traffic has to be shut. So there are very serious consequences arising out of a volcano, right? And it leads to a major disaster. So on this note, I would like to end the discussion for today. Please take down the mains practice questions for your answer writing. I've given 2 detailed questions based on what we have studied earlier. So I expect you to take up these questions seriously and practice answer writing, especially if you're preparing for 2025, right? You have enough time to focus on answer writing. Please pick up these questions, write an answer and post them in the comment section so that you can help other aspirants as well. So that is it for now. I hope you liked the session and I hope you understood all the topics that we have discussed. If you did, please press the like button, share your comments on what you think about our initiatives. We'll be going through the comments later, and do subscribe to our channel. So that is it for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. Take care. Have a good day.